Hey, what's up, Serpentine here, taking a look at the MMORPG Skyforge, a joint development venture between the Allods team, the guys behind Allods Online, and Obsidian Entertainment, the guys behind numerous RPGs like Wasteland 2 and Pillars of Eternity. Skyforge has you playing as one of many Immortals whose job it is to protect the people of Allion. You oversee all the events of the world from the capital of Allion and warp in to help out in situations where your powers will be needed. Skyforge isn't what you would expect from an ordinary MMO and honestly only just manages to make it into the category. There is no large interconnected world like you see in other MMOs like World of Warcraft or Arcade, where you can walk to almost anywhere in the world. Skyforge instead opts for instance dungeons called squad missions that can be completed solo or with up to 3 squad members, with the dungeon scaling in difficulty depending on the number of players. These squad missions are the main content of the game, with each dungeon being played multiple times at higher difficulties for the questline and also to gain more sparks to upgrade your character. The dungeons consist of a couple of mini-bosses before you take on the final boss of the dungeon, with the final boss usually providing for a very intense and fun experience where the action-orientated combat takes full effect as you have to dodge attacks so as not to get one-shot. The region areas on the other hand provide more of that open world feel, but only slightly as the maps are still fairly small, but they do contain a bunch of side quests for you to complete. This mode is honestly a little bit dull, and while playing in these regions the game starts to gain that feeling of an MMO grind. Thankfully, however, you don't have to complete the side quests and can just focus on the main storyline, bypassing the kill so many of this thing or collect so many of this drop. Even in these areas you won't see a ton of people around, and for very good reason, as the content isn't as fun to play as the dungeons, and you only really have to go to the region once and spend an hour or so before you never have to go back. Finally, there is PvP that consists of a free-for-all mode, 3v3 and finally 5v5. I wasn't able to play the team-based modes, but from the free-for-all mode there is some depth with chaining character abilities that you don't really use while PvEing. In many of the maps, the closer you are to the center, the more powerful you become, so it encourages players to the center of the map. Other than that though, the PvP isn't doing anything too special or different. The combat in Skyforge is action-based, but does have an odd targeting system included, where most of your abilities won't be usable unless you have an enemy targeted. This kind of combat feels a little odd at first, but is actually a really solid way of doing it, especially once you get the hang of locking onto enemies. Plus, I imagine it's a way to deal with frustrating lag that you can experience in other action-based MMOs. As for the underlying mechanics and features that we are used to from MMOs, Skyforge changes some of them up a bit and eliminates some entirely. The gear that you change out consists of 2 weapon slots and 4 rings. That's all you'll have access to early on. Later on you will also unlock 4 amulet slots and a trophy slot. Armor is absent from the game and is honestly a little bit disappointing, as with many MMO players and even RPG players, getting a new piece of armor and actually having that change your look is a big part of the game. Instead, Skyforge implements a costume feature where you can collect costumes and change them whenever you want with no stats tied to them at all. The economy in Skyforge is non-existent with no player-driven markets. Instead, the market only allows you to buy boosters, licenses for mounts, and costumes. Basically, Skyforge focuses purely on combat and not much else. No resource gathering, no professions, and no crafting. There is one side mechanic in the form of adepts, dedicated followers that can be sent on missions that will end up giving you small stat boosts. As an immortal, you rely on followers to increase your power, and with adepts, you can spread the word about your good deeds to gain more followers, and in turn, more adepts. This is basically a small management task of sending adepts to complete time-based missions and building chapels so as to gain the stat boost. Skyforge also does a couple of things different in terms of the class you play. We've seen this featured in a couple of MMOs here and there, allowing you to play whatever class you want whenever you want. Unfortunately, you only have access to 3 of the 13 total classes at the beginning, with Cryomancer being your damage dealer, Paladin being your defensive class, and Priest being your support. The other 10 classes unlock the further you progress in the game via the Ascension Atlas, a large skill tree that unlocks not only classes but abilities, passives, and God mode. You'll be using 3 different coloured sparks to progress through the tree, with the Spark of Balance, the Spark of Creation, and finally the Spark of Destruction. Each node that is unlocked in the Ascension tree will contribute those stats to any class that you play. The lower level skill tree is where you can start unlocking class specific abilities and passives, using class specific sparks that are gained from random drop. Your character's level in the game isn't your standard fixed number with so much XP taking you to the next level. Instead, Skyforge calculates a prestige ranking from your currently equipped items, and how many skill tree nodes that you have unlocked, which is actually a really good way to keep matchmaking balanced and to quickly find out which player is statistically stronger than the other. With the usual level system, 2 people can be the same level, but one of them can have legendary items equipped while the other can have common, and they will still be queued together, whereas with Skyforge's prestige system, there would be a significant gap. Other features of the game include a guild system, or a pantheon as it's called in Skyforge. Here you'll be able to build up your pantheon by gaining resources from the adept feature mentioned earlier. There are buildings that give you bonus stats, gain you access to extremely difficult dungeons, and probably most importantly, a building that gives you access to Pantheon Wars, where your Pantheon will take on other Pantheons in PvP and PvE trials, with up to 100 players from each Pantheon. Being successful in a Pantheon War will give you control over a territory that will generate income for you, unlock special costumes and mounts, and you will gain enhancements to the Ascension Atlas. Skyforge's free-to-play model offers a premium subscription to the game that gives you a couple of resource bonuses, including 50% spark and credit gains, which basically equates to 50% experience gain, 50% more building resources for the Pantheon, and free teleportation. The other areas of the game that the premium currency is more beneficial is buying new costumes, mounts, and licenses for those mounts. The licenses for mounts last 1 hour each, and the timer is only running when you are riding the mount. Once you've purchased numerous licenses, you will unlock that mount permanently and never have to purchase a license for it again. Altogether, Skyforge is an MMO focused on combat, with all other elements taking a backseat or just not implemented at all. The dungeon style to the game provides a nice polished experience with no gap-filling content and not much time wasting as is seen in other titles in the genre. The dungeons don't get old too quickly either, as each time you complete one, the next time you go to do that dungeon it will be a harder difficulty. The game doesn't offer any real downtime activities like professions, crafting or actual resource gathering, so it's not really an MMO you can spend a bunch of time in doing different things. More of an MMO that you can play for a couple of hours a day unless you are really into the combat. Anyway, that's been my player preview for Skyforge. The game is currently in open beta with no official release date as of yet. If you want to find out more about the game, check out the links below. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys next time.